Hey, what's up guys, and welcome back to another League of Legends guide video. And today's guide, we're gonna be looking over Yasuo. Now, firstly, before we get into the guide itself and how we're gonna explain, all of his abilities and stuff, we're gonna talk a little bit about Yasuo himself. Yasuo is a fighter, and he's most likely played on the mid lane and sometimes even on top lane because he's pretty good early game for piercing tanks, and on the mid lane, he's pretty much good for dealing damage and for building up well and at least destroying the enemy. So far, people think he's pretty much broken, but it's debatable on how his power works, but it's all about getting fed and stuff because when he gets fed, he can do ridiculous amount of damage, and this is really why people ban him in ranked or in draft picks, because he's not really, he pretty much does damage like early and late game, and it's that's pretty much Yasuo himself, and he is banned a lot, but he's pretty difficult to play also. But once you get used to him, I think it gets easier to play, and then he starts becoming a person that's pretty much broken. But he also has a very nice kit that keeps him ahead in games, and it also makes him a strong fighter for especially taking on 2v1s and others, because he's really good at he's a really good 1v1 champ. And he's also, especially at late game, he's pretty much good at taking out a whole team, sometimes even on his own, depending on what you build, but that's pretty much what we're going to go into. But now we're going to start off with Yasuo, and we're going to go on to his abilities. So firstly, we're going to start off with his passive. Yasuo's critical strike chance is doubled additionally. Yasuo builds towards a shield whenever he is moving. The shield triggers when he takes damage from a champion or a monster. So as you can see on the bottom left, you can actually see Yasuo. When Yasuo runs, he builds up a shield, which is the bar under, so he does not take any mana, or he doesn't really take any energy or anything. He's just basically a no mana champion that has a bar at the bottom which represents his shield, and every time you run, that bar builds up. Once it's completely full and once it's white, it means that he can be hit but not be hurt. Depending on what kind of ability he's hit with. If he's hit with a beam, it will reduce the damage that happens to him. If he's being auto-attacked or anything else, sometimes even used by an ability, it's not gonna hurt him. So if you're ever playing against a Yasuo, it's best to take out a shield before you engage on a fight with it. And his other passive, which is pretty much the critical strike, is doubled. That means if you buy any critical chance items, that means that it will be doubled in the bottom left. As you can see, normally when you see the stats on the bottom left for your champion, the stats will double if you actually buy an item. But let's say, for example, you bought a static shiv, which does about 30% crit. This will double and give Yasuo 60% of crit. And then once you buy something like a cloak of agility, it will double that 20% to 40%, already having from those two items 100% crit chance, which makes him very strong. Now we're gonna move over to his Q ability, Steel Tempest, which has no cost and has a range of 475. A skill shot basic attack after 2 successful Steel Tempests. The next fires a tornado that knocks up an enemy airborne. So every time you level up this ability, it will do more damage, and it's most likely, I think it's best to upgrade this ability first when you're going through upgrading stuff through your kit, but it's always best to upgrade your Q mostly and then do your ultimate whenever you can. But here's the thing, his Q is also classed as a basic attack. So that means, for example, if he went up against a Shen's W can actually block Yasuo's Q, which is pretty interesting for Shen's, and this is what makes Yasuo not possibly the strongest, because he has a bunch of counters to people that do a lot of damage, for example, like Riven and Fiora, because they're good 1v1 champions as well. Not only Yasuo is, but they are also, and they can be counters to Yasuo as well, but we'll talk about that more later. Now we're gonna move over to Yasuo's W, which is Wind Wall, which has no cost and 400 range. This creates a moving wall that blocks an enemy projectile, and creating a moving wall that blocks all enemy projectiles for 4 seconds. So this means any kind of projectiles, any kind of basic attacks, or any kind of projectile, like let's say, for example, Draven's ultimate, which is pretty much global, Ash's ultimate, Jinx's ultimate, stuff like that, like projectile ultimate, stuff like that. Even Fizz's Shark can even be stopped by the wind wall, so it stays in place, and so it doesn't really attack anyone. The only things that can go through the wind wall are beams, stuff like Lux's ulti, Xerath's Q, Vel'Koz's ultimate as well, like all that stuff can go straight through the wind wall like beams and stuff, but every other projectile, including auto attacks, any abilities that are projectiles, and pretty much almost everything can be blocked. And that's what makes part of his kit pretty much powerful and very good for 1v1ing as well, because his kit just is really good. So now we're gonna move over to his E, which is a sweeping blade costing nothing at a range of 475. Dashes through a unit, dealing escalating magic damage, which each cast. So every time you upgrade this, you can do more damage, and you can somewhat build a bit of AP and maybe, you know, do a bit of damage with your E. Your E can do pretty much a lot of damage as well, and it can also be used for like farming and stuff. But the good thing about using this, you can also combine Sweeping Blade with Steel Tempest, so you can press E and Q, then you can make Yasuo spin on a bunch of targets, so it counts as like, so it does area of effect damage. So every time you press E and Q towards a person, even with your tornado, or even with a normal Steel Tempest without it being stacked on the third one, you can always press E and Q, and he does like a circle spinning kind of damage, and it can be used to hit multiple targets at once. Even for farming, you can farm multiple minions at once by doing that, and it's pretty useful as well. So now we're gonna look over at his ultimate, which is Last Breath. No cost and a range of 1200. This moves to a target and strikes them repeatedly for heavy damage. Can only be casted to airborne targets. So that means if you knock someone airborne with your tornado, that's the only thing that will let you cast your ultimate, because that's more of like a, it's more like an animation kind of type ultimate that does a bunch of damage in the air. And you can see an example on the bottom left as well, so you kind of get what I mean. But you have to knock someone airborne, but not even you has to do it. Anyone else can knock them up. Let's say, for example, Alistar can knock someone up. Blitzcrank can knock someone up. As long as someone's knocked up, there will be an indicating arrow showing to that Yasuo can press his ultimate. So this also means if a bunch of targets are together, let's say there's 5 targets and Malphite ultis them. If they're all knocked airborne, Yasuo can use his ultimate on all 5 of them and possibly do a bunch of damage, or maybe even hope for a pentakill. But even Yasuo can do this himself. He can knock a bunch of people up with his tornado, and you have a bunch of time. You have at least one second, I'm pretty sure, a whole second with your tornado at least. But if it's anyone else that has a good knock-up effect, you can use that ultimate as long as everyone's knocked up, and you can do a bunch of damage altogether. And for 15 seconds, Yasuo's critical strike gains 50% bonus armor penetration, which affects armor from its items, buffs, and runes and masteries. That's pretty damn cool and pretty damn useful for when you're Yasuo. But that's kind of what makes him a very, very strong champion in general. So now that we've talked about Yasuo more, we're gonna go over his builds, and then we're gonna go over his runes and masteries. So we're gonna go along with the builds that I would probably recommend you going with, or maybe the core items, and then all the situational items you can go for, and you can go for any other items that you guys prefer. So now bringing up with the builds, these are all the items, and on the top lane you can see the Static Shiv and the Phantom Dancer, plus with the Infinity Edge. This doesn't mean that you combine Static Shiv with Phantom Dancer, but it's an optional kind of choice. Static Shiv does help a lot when you're farming, so then you guys can farm the minions a lot easier, because Static Shiv does strike through champions and through minions, and all that Phantom Dancer does is it has additional speed for attacking, so it has more attack speed than a Static Shiv, and it also has slightly more crit, but it won't make a difference because it will already be 100% crit by having only these 2 items at least. So at least you have an Infinity Edge and a Static Shiv or a Phantom Dancer. That's completely up to you. And then down here are the build choices that you guys can go for Yasuo. So these are pretty much all the items that normally people would build on Yasuo. For lifesteal, people would go Blade of the Ruined King, Bloodthirster, Ravenous Hydra, and then they would go something for like Death's Dance too. And then they would go for Mercurial Scimitar if you want to go like against AP champions, and it's really good for removing CC because it has the QSS build. And you can even go for Mauve Malmortius if you guys want to go against people like that. And also you want to finish off with something like Guardian Angel, and Frozen Mallet is a bit of a tanky item, but it's all up to you. All of this is situational, but Berserker's Greaves, yes, that's one of another core of Yasuo. But if there does seem to be a lot of CC on the opposite team, you can always go Mercurial Treads. And if you ever want to pierce down a tank, you can go for Lord Dominic's Regard, and that will do a lot of damage towards the tank, and you can pierce them pretty well. But that's just a rundown of what kind of stuff you can build on Yasuo. But the items that I build are right over here on the screen. This is my common build that I mostly go for, because the only reason I prefer Static Shiv over Phantom Dancer is because I can farm a lot easier, and you get the critical burst out of the Static Shiv. Whereas with the Phantom Dancer, all you get is a bit of attack speed, but there's really not a need when you're more reliant on your Q, because you're even going to use that on the minions. And when you get Bloodthirster, you can strike a minion and it can thunder through all of the minions, and it can give you more life to steal. so it's a lot easier to lifesteal when you have Static Shiv than having a Phantom Dancer. Phantom Dancer does have a lot of speed, so you can lifesteal a little quicker, but this one's just more like an instant kind of lifesteal. And the only reason I add a Scimitar is because you can remove CC. Also, it packs a lot of lifesteal as long as you combine it with the Bloodthirster. And it's got some magic resist as well, so it's kind of got its advantages, and it's pretty good against AP champions itself. So this is more of a build that's good against both type of champions. And I generally just go for Berserker's Greaves just to fill up for the Phantom Dancer so it doesn't really become an issue. And then Infinity Edge is pretty much the item you really always want to build. And I always finish off with a Guardian Angel because it's got armor and magic resist, and also does bring you back to life and has that cooldown as well. But you know, you always want to come back to life as Yasuo, possibly make some pretty good outplays with him. So now we're going to talk about the runes and masteries for Yasuo. So what we want to take is 3 quintessences of attack speed, 9 marks of attack damage, 9 seals of scaling health, and 9 glyphs of scaling magic resist. And then for the masteries, we want to put 18 into ferocity, so we put 5 into fury, 1 into feast, 5 into vampirism, 1 into bounty hunter, 5 into battering blows, and 1 into warlord's bloodlust. Now the only reason we chose warlords instead of any other because a lot of Yasuo players would either take fervor or thunderlords. Warlord's bloodlust has actually gotten a buff recently, so you gain speed after attacking something, but it doesn't happen like all the time, but it happens after every few hits. You get additional speed and you can move around a lot quicker, and you can get a lot of lifesteal as well. And then we want to put the rest into resolve, so 5 into recovery, 1 into tough skin, 5 into runic armor, and 1 into insight. Now that we've discussed all the runes, masteries, builds, and abilities of Yasuo, we're just gonna pretty much conclude to how Yasuo is played and what he's really good for. So Yasuo is pretty much a really good champion that can take on pretty much a bunch of champions at once. He's also a really good 1v1 champion along as well as in the beginning. He can get countered by other 1v1 champions or heavy AP champions, looking more at people like Malzahar, but he also does fail to other 1v1 champions sometimes, but it's most likely going to be Fiora. Fiora can be a huge counter to Yasuo, but if played properly, you can actually beat your own counters, but it's not as easy as it sounds or seems, because one of his biggest counters can be Malzahar or Renekton or something like that, or even sometimes Garen, because Garen can only be harassed early with Yasuo, but when you go to late game, Garen can harass you late game, so you have to be very careful and probably invest into a Lord Dominic's after getting your critical strike to 100%. But if you're gonna fight tanky people, it's best to buy Frozen Mallet and probably get through your situations like that, because it's not easy to beat every single person, but every single champion has a counter, but people that are tanky early also can counter Yasuo, including Tahm Kench. Tahm Kench could be a huge counter as well, because all Tahm Kench can do is pretty much eat Yasuo and probably even hold him in long enough to stop his third stack Q, which is his tornado, but there's also a good of upsides about Yasuo as well. So Yasuo is pretty much always played in the mid lane. He's not really well played anywhere else. Well, you can play him on top lane as well. He's played on top and mid lane most likely. But once you get yourself to 100% critical chance, which you do, well, it gives you a really big head start. Your passive gives you a huge head start to how you play, and it also helps you beat your opponents a lot quicker as well. So even sometimes when you're falling behind, Yasuo still has a chance to get himself back up, but if he's not fed at all, or if he's not getting any kills, he will be useless late game, so you gotta be very careful of that. It's best to always make sure that you have your wind wall and use it properly during team fights and stuff like that, because you can stop a bunch of projectiles while engaging into fights, and it can also save your teammates. It's always good for blocking a lot of ultimates. It can almost block every single projectile ultimate there is. Well, pretty much every single projectile can be deflected by the wind wall, so it can't really, nothing can really be affected. So his wall is much like Brahm's wall, but it just doesn't really hurt him. It's just a constant wall that doesn't really affect anyone. It will just break into the wall and it will not do anyone else harm. This even includes ultis like Nami's ulti. It doesn't seem too much like a projectile, but it pretty much is, which is a flowing river that just comes straight towards you. But it's always best to try it out on people, and it's best to try out on ultimates that you don't know if you can block with, so you can pretty much get to know how good Yasuo can be in the team fighting position. And the fact that you don't need to build speed, and as long as you're on the mid lane, you have a bunch of mobility, which is with the minions. As long as you're dashing through them, you can always zigzag, or you can always go to your opponent, hit them, and dash back to the other minions, so you can be a lot safer. So you can make good trades, do a lot of damage, and you can pretty much get far in the game like that. And I'd always advise you guys to probably, if you're gonna play on the mid lane, to take Ignite when you're playing Yasuo, because it does a bunch of damage as long as with the true damage on the Ignite, and it will give him a good boost to getting a kill right at the start, because Yasuo can even get kills pretty much much easily at level 1 as well, so that's pretty much a huge advantage about Yasuo. But even sometimes he can dash through the jungle monsters to get over walls as well, but you have to position it right. Like, let's say for example you're walking down the lane where you can see the Gromp, and the wall behind the Gromp, you can actually jump over that towards the Gromp if you cast your wind wall or put a ward down, because wind wall does give you small amounts of vision, and you can actually press E when you stick to the wall, and you can get away from your opponents like that, and it's been used pretty much a lot to outplay the enemy or escape pretty well. Now, the timing of your ultimate is all based on who is knocked up, how many people you have knocked up, or how many people your teammate has knocked up, because you can always position for pretty good stuff, like having a Malphite on your team, telling him to knock up the whole team on such a timing where you can also press your R, and you can also hold him there, do heavy damage, and keep him there to do a bunch of damage, because that ultimate can hit up to 5 people. But this is pretty much why everyone says that Yasuo is one of the most OP champions in League of Legends, and this is exactly why he's been banned a bunch of times as well, only because he has a very, very good kit that does actually work against almost most of the champions in League of Legends. So it's pretty much really useful to have Yasuo on the team, because his wind wall is a big game changer, because it can stop a bunch, and it's just unbelievably awesome. So anyways, guys, that was it. That was the guide for Yasuo. So if you guys want to see more videos like this, or if you guys want to see more extended guides, then go ahead and put it in the comment section below, and go ahead and suggest me what kind of guide I should do next, so I can, you know, start listening to suggestions and stuff, because I think it's gonna start being fun if I start listening to suggestions and keep track of the guides, because I'm gonna upload guides more frequently since I've been missing a lot. So yeah, so I'm gonna keep track of that. So anyways, guys, thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. Thank you guys so much for making me get to 70 subs within the past few days. This is pretty amazing, guys. This is pretty amazing. Keep the support up, and thank you guys so much. Hopefully you guys share this video, go show it to other people, and you know, just get more people to subscribe here. We can have like a little party over here, you know, we can be friends. Yeah. So anyways, guys, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you guys in my next video. Peace, guys, and see ya.